Hey guys, it's Evan. That was strange. It said my connection was unstable. That's never happened before. But it's Evan. Today is Sunday, August 23rd, 8:23:49 p.m. CT. I cleaned up a little bit at the gym, at the community center, and I guess I kind of like this, whatever's happening here. I might chop this off right here and just keep this just to see how I like it. I might do that tomorrow. And I went Well, my family was very disorganized this morning, but I cut some of the backyard grass. I did the best that I could. The backyard fence keeps falling over and over and over again. I keep picking it up, and it's sad because the reality is that my family struggles so much with a lot of things in life. And just now, I was pulling into the neighborhood in my power chair, and I saw a neighbor with the garage open. And hey, I don't discriminate based on class, race, creed, whatever you associate with, but I just find it so unreal how there are people in the world that basically get away with robbery, and my family can't even get simple things done. And it's not even just like my family. Like when I was at the apartment, I couldn't get just everything was just so difficult. And at one point, I did blame myself. I thought it was dumb and stupid that I allowed these people to take things so far with me without reacting. And when I finally did react, I barely reacted and everybody took offense. And I'm like, you guys got paid to probe me and mess with me and meddle with me and tinker with me and push me to no end and show up with the police at my door, phony police at my door. And when I say, hey, it's my fault that I let you guys treat me this way. Everybody just started crying like a big baby, and I was just this huge threat. And once again, with this whole situation, with getting that phony phone call from that weirdo telling Raheem or whoever that was to go off themselves, and me reporting it, and then the FBI saying that I was told to stop calling, which is a lie, and they need to stop because that is a crime. I don't care who you work for. If you are an employee of the federal government and you lie, you are committing a crime. Newsflash. And if they want to sit here and play the card that I'm not in any way, shape, or form protected under federal law, then they really are in the wrong. So they're just awful. They're terrible people. And today at church, it was tossed out there. This card was played that, walking in the way with Jesus would, I guess, tenfold give us blessings and stuff like that, which is like cool, whatever. It's not that I don't understand that. It's just the reality of life, of this life and how things are. And as I was sitting there in church, I was looking around and I was just like, wow, like I wonder. I was on my way back and I was like just strolling my wheelchair, which is broken and messed up right now, allegedly. I can't really control all the features in it because the VA gave it to me, but my wheelchair has a 15-mile range, 15 mile, and I've gone like for me, it's super dangerous to go down the road at 6 miles per hour because I'm in a power chair. Mind you, there's a 30-mile per hour speed limit, so let's do the math. Let's be freaking logical for somebody that's trying to control or whatever the features on my wheelchair, on my power chair. Okay, so there's mean, average, median, right? So if you do the average of, there's Evanator on a power chair at max. And I can't even go 6 mile per hour max when everybody else, even though the speed limit says 30 miles per hour, is going 60. So here I am at 6 miles and everybody's going 60 mile down the road under 30. That's super dangerous. And if I had like when I first got my power chair, I could be at a really steady 8 mile per hour. Like I could, that was pretty steady for me. And even if I came to like an abrupt stop, it was still like, okay, I can turn the corner. People saw me, but me going at this rate is not safe at all because it's just not. I don't know if people think, or, the slower that I go, the better when I'm outdoors. No, It's one thing when I'm indoors. Okay, I can understand that, but whatever. My power chair needs to get fixed. But as I'm, rolling around after church, I'm like thinking because I was looking around in church, and I was like, I wonder, spiritual trauma aside, I wonder because you could just tell looking at some of these people that they have so much just clogged up inside of them that they're not letting out, And I love this church. I love going to this church. I love, you know, the I just love certain things about this church. I do get like one testimony was talking about how the LDS church is bashed, but I think that a very deeply rooted American aspect about the LDS church. Granted, historically, there are some things that are not highly regarded, but I think that it's one thing to understand the Church of Jesus Christ, and I think that so many modern day Mormons consider the Church of Jesus Christ as Mormon, and that's just how they talk in their terminology. But like the root of the culture and the root of the religion, it's not that it's non existent, it's just that the adaptations and the practices now are not like in the 17th, like early 18th, or when John found the plates. I mean, when Joseph Smith, John's still on my poop list. When Joseph Smith found the plates, and I think because I was surrounded by, like, I lived out there in Pittsburgh, Palmyra. I worked out there. I would eat vegan ice cream, vegan chocolate ice cream out there. I would go to the dairy farms. I would go to the maple farms. I would go to the cornfields. I would go to the sunflower fields. Like, because I was in that culture, 4th of July out there, and that was just where I lived. I think that I understood the original church in ways that maybe, especially out here in Katy, people don't really understand. I'm not saying that, whatever, but I'm just saying if you go like to like the original historic historical markers of the church, like the oldest library of the church is out there in New York. A lot of the church's origins are in New York. And there are still parts in America. I know that everybody in the country thinks it's like Arizona, Utah, but it's not. Like there are still in New York, especially upstate New York, there are still people that, and I think they get often confused for Amish people. They are not Amish people. This is the original. These are people that have generations of belonging to the original church, like the original Mormon church. And they do not acknowledge the Church of Jesus Christ. Like, they don't, how do I put this? Like, the modern LDS church, like the modern Mormon church, they always just harp on, like, they do not condone polyamory and polygamy, but I don't know like how to explain it. I'm not discrediting or taking away from that and saying that it's right. I'm just saying that I have experienced, having lived out in New York, that the original church, members of the original church, by generations down, they don't even consider this modern day church as authentic Mormonism. So they don't even recognize the LDS church. I know that sounds weird, but the original Mormons don't acknowledge this church. And I know that sounds super weird. Like, how is that possible? It's just a thing. And it sounds weird, but it's a thing. There is like spirit shame, in interfaith shame within the church, because a lot of these you know, I can't say that they're old, but the church has spread all around the world to the point where in areas of their history where people had never left the land because of their religious beliefs, and not only have they never left their land, they never stopped practicing the original ways of the Mormon church, where the modern day church does not approve of a lot of things. So I know that's strange to say, but anyways, I was thinking as I was looking around, like, you know, what was the theme for me was constant like spiritual security for me. I was just like, I have experienced being let down in such a worldly way. And the day that I joined the church was actually attacked by some weirdo in Michigan or something like that. And so today, as I was sitting in church, not that this thought hasn't come in my mind before, it came in my mind, I would say, three times. The day that I was yes, the day that I was baptized, the day I shared my initial testimony, and the day that someone from the state came into the church, and I just shared with them, like, the day that I was baptized into the church, this critical event happened, and that's when I understood, like, that there are worldly things, evil things that are at work, and when they exert all this evil energy is exerted to create harm, you know, all of these glorious and righteous things are beyond prepared for these moments. And God, more importantly, prevails in those moments at showing me that there is nothing to fear. But I just feel a shared sentiment with a lot of people right now that there is no form, shape, there is nothing tangible to reassure us present day that we are safe. And it's sad. We're not safe on the internet. We're not safe using our phones. We're not safe expressing ourselves. We're not safe walking out of our homes. We're not safe in our homes. We're not safe when we purchase things online. We get scammed. When we can't even get refunds anymore. We can't, people can't even travel. People can't get on airplanes anymore. People are getting just tossed around, and to say the least. So I was looking around in church, and I'm like, I wonder if these people have ever like utilized their resources outside of the church. Do they even know a lot of these resources exist? And like, if they were to pick up and call 988 right now, you know what I mean? Like, if they were to pick up and call 311, if they were to call, 211, and I'm like thinking to myself, here I am having called so many resources to help myself, my quality of life, live a better life, you know, achieve mental wellness, financial wellness, stability, organization in my life. And I see these people that they're just like oblivious to what's at work. And I was just thinking to myself, maybe this is something that I can, like, one of my new friends, the older Sam, not the younger Sam, I talked to him a little bit today. He texted me first, and I'm not texting anybody outside of my family. He just texted me right now. I'm not texting anybody outside of my family at all. Like, if people reach out to me to check on me, cool, that's fine. But outside of that, I'm not sitting here, you know, entertaining it, especially after this stupid experience with the
Alert from
FBI.
messages. Country code 1713-444-7048.
Well, especially after that experience with them telling me that they told me not to, that's basically setting me up, like framing me, and I'm not going to allow these people to frame me at all for something that has never, ever, 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 ever happened. How about we talk about what did happen? How about we talk about when I walked up in there when I was 30 years old? How about we run the footage on that and what was done? And I want everybody to run the footage inside the facility and outside the facility so you can show the world how dumb you were with all of you guys driving these Teslas and me going in there and telling you guys, hey, do you want my RFID card? And you said no. So how about we run the receipts and the real footage? I know I wasn't a perfect man, but I know I did everything above and beyond so that I could get myself out. So I'm not going to tolerate this crap anymore. I fought for my country, for everybody else's freedom, and now that I'm veteran retired, I like I beyond deserve this sense of security and peace in my life. And I already like died. So, it's just time for me to just be happy in that peace. Like without having to worry constantly about the retaliation and the repercussions that came from doing the right thing. You know, I told John, the idiot, I said, Operator 16 VAOIG, I said, put yourself in my shoes. And the reality is, if he honestly is a veteran like he says he is, whether he wants to admit it or not, he's already in my shoes. Because if you think it's not happening to you and it's only happening to me, or that I'm BSing, you're you're just see me. I'm in the foxhole. You're in a bigger hole than you can even imagine, because I at least know what I am defending myself against and how to defend myself. You're just hooey fooey. You think you're protected and you're not. He thinks he has the world made and he doesn't. And I don't think I have my world made. I don't think that I'm set up for life or I'm setting myself up for success. I know that the God that created me has equipped me in every single way for everything. And it's sick to say this, but there were people that equipped me knowing my adversity. Not that they judged me, but they knew and they saw me, and they knew that by giving me these opportunities in my life, how far I could go when I didn't know that myself. And I learned in those experiences, even though those interactions were very few, I learned to do things. I learned to, I don't want to say to do things on my own, because without those interactions and those people, that's not by definition doing it alone. I'm not doing it alone, but, and I'm not going to sit here and say like these people taught me everything that I know, because those interactions, I learned from those interactions. I don't think there was any like intent on the other side other than these people had experienced life to the point where they knew that people like me, somebody that looks like me, talks like me, is like me, there is no way. And I had to learn for myself that there is no way for somebody like me. Sadly, I had to learn that for myself. And because I know that about myself, I think that I can, and I do succeed at a lot of things now. I did not know back then the racism, the prejudice. I didn't know that that's what I was living. To me, that was just life, my life. And now I see that I tolerated so much. And that's what I saw in church today. I saw people that are sick of tolerating so much, and they're already there because they tolerate things in a spiritual way that they're trying to heal from. They're trying to find answers to, let alone everything else in the world that's impacting them. And I was just like constantly thinking about this theme of like spiritual security. Like, maybe that is my calling within the church, is to bring it to my bishop's attention, to bring it to the attention of the church, that these worldly agencies and entities, although they employ people in the church and have historically employed people in the church, modern day, they are not for us. They are not for protecting our church. They are not for protecting our freedoms and our religions right now. They are only for protecting one man and his agenda. And we need to wake up to that reality now, because I see the day that I came into this church what God was doing in that moment. I think that it's kind of really coming together for me. And I have seen my leadership, I have seen the president of the church in very difficult positions. And not just from me coming into the church, from all the worldly things that are happening. And the president of our church has had to deal with things that historically this church has never really had to deal with. And I feel like maybe in a spiritual way and in a legal way, in the way the church knows best, they are handling these worldly operations. But I feel that, you know, I I have seen this church, regardless of worldly operations, I have seen this church really constantly, how do I say, like, they have really constantly continued to see Pastor Bob and Pastor Candy. Pastor Bob taught me how the devil operates, and Pastor Candy taught me how to worship and praise and the importance of praise and worship and music. But this church and the people in this church, it's like, I felt in some way, kind of like with my mental health care providers, that they were like crowd surfing me. But now I feel like this church has picked me up, out of the crowd. And even though I got on the stage with them, you know, they were kind of just like, well, he deserves a chance to show us what he has, like everybody else. That was kind of like what the LDS church did. And it's like I opened up my mouth, and everybody else was like, whoa, this guy's worth taking lead mic. And the only reason I feel that I was able to pick up lead mic is because of Pastor Candy, to be honest with you. Like, Pastor Candy taught me not to be ashamed in any language, any form of, tonality or music or vibe, just to, you know, put my hands up and sing and praise and worship, and I guess like the intricacies of praise and worship through music. And I've always been musically inclined. I've always been. My grandfather instilled that in me at a very, 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 very young age. And it all started with piecing together music equipment, audio equipment, everything from headphones. My grandfather, my grandfather had, like, I don't know, like bulk headphones packs, cassette packs, and stuff like that. And we would just tear them apart, put them together. My grandpa would resell them. So a lot of that's how my grandpa made an immense amount of money. I mean, we would tear apart all kinds of gadgets like that, and he would flip them. And eventually, he kind of came into, like, it took a lot of work for, he would repair the more difficult things. A lot of the things he would always repair that made him the most money were the cameras. So the tripods, the Kodaks, the accordion that was in the Kodaks. I remember that was super, super pesky for my grandfather. Like, he loved those accordion style cameras, but he hated them because they were very difficult. And like, once you tore one of those accordion style cameras, it's like game over. So, but those types of cameras made him the most money. And so he would do those things, and I would have like the tiny little things, but it would be like us tag teaming all of these gadgets, you know, just for him to make all of this money. Were like the big ticket items. And so finally, I don't know if it was just like the time, the era, or what it was, but my grandfather, he started to, he always did the flea markets here in America and in Texas, all over. Like, he did the flea markets here in America. But as my great grandparents were aging and getting sick, my grandfather thought, and his cousins did the market where he grew up. And he grew up, it's not, he grew up in Monterrey, Mexico, but where his cousins grew up is a place called Valle Verde, which means Green Valley, like the Green Mountains. And high green mountains, the greenest mountains in Monterey, kind of like that. And we were just so super high in the mountain. Like, I remember coming from Nuevo Leon, Monterey, and getting a little away from the inner city, and I remember looking up, and like it was like right here, I would see a tiny. It almost, in my mind, I'm just seeing like those toothpick umbrella cocktail things, because when I was so little, I would just look like this up, and at the very top, it was like I would see like a bright umbrella at the top, and it was like a speckle. I could just see it in my head, and that tiny umbrella was a tent at the highest peak of the mountain, and it was just tents all the way down a market, like flea market, and it was from the peak of the mountain all the way down. And my grandfather's cousins lived, mm, they lived pretty high up in the mountain, not at the peak. I would say maybe about three-quarters of the way up. And my grandfather went to visit his cousins there, and it was his cousins and his oldest brother that passed away. His kids lived there, and that would be my twin cousins and their sister and their mom, and my great grandma, my great grandpa were there, and they were getting older. So my grandfather, he was like, "Well, we're gonna go ahead and go visit basically my grandma, my grandpa, my great grandma, my great grandpa, and we're gonna take the things that we have been working on here, and we're going to see how it goes there." So we did, and my grandfather, I think, came to the realization of like all the equipment sold, like they were sold out instantly. But my grandfather kind of came to the realization of like he sold all these big ticket items, and everybody in the mountain had all of these like huge surplus CDs and DVDs, and they were all bootleg. And my grandpa, I think, was just like fascinated. Like, he knew it was wrong. My grandpa never ever thought, and he never did do that ever. But my grandfather was
Alert
like,
from
I
messages.
think it kind of like came as an epiphany, like an aha moment for him. Like, we took luxurious Kodak cameras, luxurious cassette packs, all audio equipment, optical equipment. We took all of this stuff because that's what my grandpa did. He worked on machines. What do you call those 8-track players? Like the CD players that spun and you replace the CDs, the 6-track, 8-track cassette, like the boom boxes. That's what we took, and my grandfather sold out instantly. So it's like my grandfather sold out instantly and had nothing left to sell, but people were there all day and night selling. And that was like a learning experience for my grandfather, because my grandfather was just like, I remember with my grandfather, after he sold out, he grabbed my hand and was like, we're gonna go to the market because we had nothing left to sell. He's like, we're gonna go down the market and see everybody else's booth and see what they have. And I remember going down the market for the very, 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 very first time with my grandfather. And my grandfather was so huge. I mean, he was just like one of my uncles. He's the tallest, and my grandfather was like one of my uncles is tall, and he's not muscular, but my grandfather was tall and big. Like my grandfather was super heavy set. I don't think any of my uncles are as heavy set as my grandfather was. Like if my grandfather fell one time, it was like a tree falling. And I mean, I remember the time my grandfather fell, and he told me not to tell my grandfather he fell. And I remember him falling onto the ground. He fell twice. He fell once when he was super, super young with me, and once when he was older, like super, super old, and that was terrible. Like he cracked his head in the shower in Mexico. And but when my grandfather fell, I'll never forget. I've never felt anybody fall like that. He fell, and if when he fell to the ground, it felt what I would imagine like if the neighbor's tree fell down to the ground, that would be like my grandfather falling. Like that's how it felt like being such a little kid and feeling him fall. So my grandfather was tall and very, 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 very big. And I remember just like holding my grandfather's hand, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of people up and down this mountain. And my grandfather, like the tallest guy, and I was just like basically like a rag doll to my grandfather, just like going down the mountain. But I remember like he was just like I think people would have like the original CD, and underneath all the original CDs, it was like bootlegs. So they wouldn't sell the original CD. The original CD was just to show you that this is copies of that CD that you're getting. Like the people couldn't buy the original CD, they were buying the bootlegs. And my grandfather was like, I have all of these originals. And I knew because I basically just finished listening to all the original CDs on the road trip to Mexico. My grandfather listened to every single version of the. We always on every road trip, everywhere, Milwaukee, wherever it was, we listened to the Eagles, and we only listened to the live version. And every other version, my grandfather thought was trash or would throw it away. And he told me, he's like, we will never ever listen to any other versions of the Eagles unless it's the Eagles alive. And he's like, even the remastered version, we will never listen to the remastered single version. We will always listen to the remastered live versions. And I said, hey, this is what Grandpa says. And my grandfather had all the original Bee Gees, Donna Summer. He would have Diana Ross. He would have Ambrosia. He would have just any like rock and roll. He would have Chicago. Like he would have all the live audios of tracks, audios of everybody. He had Elvis live. He had, you know, this guy had Liberace. He had anything you can think of. CD live versions, rock and roll, and we just listened to all that on the road trip. And my grandfather was like, I have like these are even like you can tell even their originals were like tacky. And like the ink would smudge off the originals. Like they printed the artwork on the CDs to say like they were the originals. And my grandfather was like, I have all of these. And my grandfather didn't have them like in the books, like people would have them in the sleeves. My grandfather had them in like very, very organized in the jewel case in the shelves. And even if they weren't organized on the shelves, my grandfather had like in the console of the car, because at the time they made them that way, he had them in the slots. And my grandfather always kept everything in those slots. He would keep the coins in the slots, like all his coins in the slots of the car when they came that way. And so he was just like, I can't believe this. Like, I have these originals, and if they're selling these bootlegs for like 10 times the price of an original in the US, he's like, I can do this. And so ultimately, my grandfather realized like he could make way more money selling, originals, reselling originals. And he started off with selling vinyls. So then my grandfather kind of went into going to rummage sales and finding like vinyls and cassette tapes, books, even, and other things. I think he really got into books too, and I think he got more into books just because I loved books. So, and I think that was something that my grandfather, maybe because he knew like how my brain was, and he knew I got like kind of like fed up and tired, that we kind of like compromised. Like, you know, I knew that, hey, this is my dad basically, and but I would just, I guess, kind of like, I got tired. I got tired of doing it. So I loved books, and that was how I, like, I don't know, I still cope. I love books so much with books. So my grandfather, I guess, met me halfway, and he started to look for books, but books where he can put his coin collection in. And that was kind of like our thing together. So we would get books, and my grandfather would teach me how to collect quarters and how to look up through World Series of books, the production of books, and look up their, if they had any form of like design, like if so, let's say like on a dime, if the design ended up having some form of, new design or new, kind of looking up not just the mint values. Anybody can look up those values pretty easy, but if there was any type of defect in the design, if one was a dupe, and or sometimes in the threads of the coins, how to check those out, so how to preserve them, how to put them in sleeves and stuff like that, how to exchange them, who to exchange them to, how to put a set in a series. And that was kind of how we bonded. My grandfather and I, that was ended up becoming how we bonded together, spent time together. We would collect coins until we could got sick of like waiting, and then we would pour out all the coins together and go through all the coins together, and you know make our books. And once we were done with the set, we would find somebody to trade with. And that was probably the greatest thing. People think my grandfather left me some unreal fortune in life, and he never did. So the fortune he left me was the knowledge of learning those things, like how to collect coins, and reading and informing myself culturally of, you know, where he came from and his family crest, and the importance of coins in the Spanish era, in the colonial era, and when the Spanish conquered Mexico, and they brought different forms of currency to the indigenous people, and how, well, I was thinking today, like, in an awful way, but in a good way, when they were talking in church. They were like, in the Mormon church, they do baptisms. I don't want to say baptisms for the dead and make it sound awful, but it's not just baptisms for the dead, it's baptisms for anyone who has not had the opportunity to be baptized. And I was thinking for myself, you know, Cortez historically was not. I'm sure there's some form of story out there portraying Cortez to be Hernan Cortez to be like a true leader in a positive way, but for the most part, Cortez was pretty relentless. Like he was not somebody you'd want to cross paths with. And I was thinking, like, how unreal would that be to be baptized in honor of like where I come from and like my family? Because in a way, it's like if Hernan Cortez himself were to get baptized. I know that sounded awful, like that sounds awful, but I'm like, you know, this is somebody who historically does not have the greatest reputation, but if I were to get baptized, that would be like a huge thing in that way. Like, this is somebody who relentlessly, I don't want to say he intentionally caused harm because it was a different time of survival then. But let's see. I don't think I have any of my devices in here. Let's do them in my power chair. Okay, I see myself here, so hopefully that means you guys can still see me and the clock's still ticking. I always say I'm gonna make these things short, but I don't. So, Hernan Cortez, Spanish conquistador, this is on Google, and former governor of New Spain. Oh, his eyes actually kind of look like my eyes, and I've never seen anybody that has the same color eyes as me like that. It's super rare that I ever see anybody's eyes. Yes? 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 Yes?